Thank you so much, Red. And back from the studio, I have the pleasure to announce the next panel discussion, which is really so much at the focus of our today's world. We all ask ourselves, how are we going to travel? What restrictions are going to be imposed? What kind of green or whatever color of passports do we have to have? Now, let's talk about digital passports and the new normal for travel, moderated by Roger Dooley from Forbes. Roger, please don't forget to mention the hashtag for Webit.
Welcome to Webit Global Impact Week, hashtag Webit. Today, our panel topic is digital passports and the new normal for travel. I'm joined by two experts on this topic. Hamid Zarghampour is the chief strategist at Trafikverket, the Swedish Transport Administration. He's focused on modernizing Sweden's transport system with a particular emphasis on innovative mobility solutions and sustainable development. Roger Millar is the transport secretary at the Washington State Department of Transport. His agency oversees a complex multimodal system for moving both people and goods. He was a leader in the Complete Streets movement to create transport systems that are safe and convenient for all users. And I'm Roger Dooley, an author, speaker, and contributor at Forbes. My interests are using neuroscience and behavioral science to make business better. And my most recent book is Friction, which is very related to this topic because the transportation system, even before the pandemic, tended to have a lot of effortful processes. So I'm really interested in hearing what our guests have to say about how the pandemic has affected things and what it will look like in the future. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, one of the most overused words in the last year has been unprecedented, but I'm guessing that from a transportation standpoint, that really applied. I'm sure neither of you had that in your playbook. As we transitioned into the pandemic, what did you see, Hamid, as your biggest challenge right out of the gate?
Well, the biggest challenge for us, thank you very much for inviting me, by the way. Thank you very much. And what I would say that the biggest challenge for us, it wasn't only for us, but for the society in general, is to change focus overnight. Only just before pandemic, we were very much focused on the role of transportation, sustainability, congestion problems in our cities, and also a lot of other things coming with transportation in general. But over the night, our focus changed from all of those important problems that we thought that we have to only serving people with goods, and also make sure that people stay home, and those people who are actually at rest use the public transport, they can consider the infection risk and making sure that they can move from a place to another without getting infected. So it was a huge challenge, not only for us, but for the whole society in total. So it was the biggest challenge to change this focus.
Mm-hmm. Roger, how about you? Was your experience different?
Our experience was similar. Here in Washington State, we learned a couple of things. We had been working for years on addressing the first mile and the last mile. And what COVID taught us is the first and last 6 feet is really what's critical to our economy and our society. So that was one kind of eye-opener. The other was just how important our essential workers are to the functioning of our society and the success of our economy. I have 7,000 employees, and when the pandemic hit and the governor ordered us to stay home and stay healthy, about half of us could, and we have been teleworking since March of 2020. The other half have been out on the front lines. They operate the Washington State ferry system, which is the largest ferry system in North America, second largest in the world. They've been out on the boats at the terminals since day one. And we didn't know a whole heck of a lot about COVID-19. I don't believe we still know a heck of a lot about COVID-19. But at the beginning, that was really tough. And the other group from my team that was out on the front lines was running the highway system, responding to incidents, keeping safety rest areas open. plowing snow in the winter. They had to be there, and they stepped up and did it. But we saw that in transport, we saw that in healthcare, we saw that in food delivery and the like. People that we take for granted, people that we don't necessarily compensate appropriately, all of a sudden they were truly essential.
I think that's universally true. I think of people like the package delivery people, the grocery workers, and so on, that we sort of took for granted before, and suddenly they're on the front lines, really are risking a lot just to be sure that people can get their food, get their stuff, and so on. So, were there any strategies, Roger, that worked particularly well as you sort of fine-tune your approach as the pandemic progressed?
Well, Governor Inslee right up front shut everything down. We had $2 billion US of construction underway and a lot of maintenance activity. We sent everybody home. We called basically a safety stop. And we immediately, working with the contracting community, working with our labor partners, we had a roundtable and we set up protocols so that we could go to work and be safe doing that. And it really came down to the basics: distancing, personal protective equipment, what we call PPE, hand washing, and the like. We put those protocols in place. We enforced them strictly. And on our construction sites, the rate of positive exposure to COVID was less than 20% of the rate of positive exposure in the general population. So those practices worked for us and enabled us to get back to work and to keep that construction progressing and keep those men and women employed during the pandemic.
Mm-hmm. I mean, in Sweden, you folks took a little bit more relaxed approach initially to COVID. I'm curious, what did you find really worked to keep things going as things progressed in Sweden?
Well, we had also, as Mr. Millar was pointing out, we also had kind of not strategy, I would say, but we together with our entrepreneur, we set up an action plan, and they tried to minimize the risk for infections everywhere. And we never stopped one day doing maintenance or continue our work. It worked. It worked in general, just because I don't know if you have heard about it, but Sweden is a very open country. It never allowed any kind of closure to restriction and close down everything. It wasn't really like that, but it was recommendation what to do. And it was very much up to this society, every individual, every part of the society took its responsibility and apply various measures to make sure that the infection risk minimizes. So this was the basic concept. But what happened really, that we in Sweden, I'm sure that it is also the same thing in US. We have a quite big capital of digital competence, and we have invested in digital infrastructure for a long time, and it showed that we could do a lot of things. Also, a lot of our work could be undertaken using digital tools and techniques. That helped us to make sure that most of the people stayed home and worked. And this was also very important for us, to make sure that people stay home, make sure to reduce the infection risk, especially when it comes to a kind of jobs that you need to be at your work. We also advised people how to travel. So suddenly we could see changes that are happening in our society, like biking, walking. It increased like never before. People did completely different things. Scooters became very popular. Everywhere you went, it was scooters. People did it themselves. So they took a huge amount of responsibility.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, because it seems like different countries, and even in the United States, different parts of the country have sort of different attitudes toward responsibility. And in some cases, a suggestion will be enough. In other cases, even a law may not be enough. So, and it's true not just in the U.S., of course, but around the world where those attitudes vary tremendously. Now at least Europe and the U.S. are gradually emerging from the pandemic. I think we're seeing much higher levels of immunity across the board, fewer infections, and so on. Hamid, which sectors are recovering of transportation are recovering more quickly, and which a little bit more slowly?
Well, what we are seeing, all of the part of the sector is actually coming back. Nothing is happening. If you look at the numbers, if you compare it with the World War II, what happened after the World War II, exactly the same pattern. Everything's coming back. People use the system exactly like it was before. So the demands are very much to get out and do a lot of things like it was before pandemic. Nothing has happened, although we have been looking forward to see some changes, that people are much more environmental friendly, maybe do things differently. They do, of course, but the demand on transportation has increased dramatically, like before pandemic, and it is increasing. It still is increasing. It's amazing what is happening. Everything wants to go back to the normal again. We had hoped that it would be slightly different, just because things are beginning. People are thinking, at least in Sweden, they are very much thinking of climate and climate changes, and these are very important issues for people here in Sweden. But still, they need transportation in all areas.
Mhm. Yeah, Roger, what's your perspective? And I'm thinking, in listening to Hamid's comments, that one thing might be that there's a sort of turning on and off like a faucet effect on all the transportation systems, where suddenly something is shut down and the demand goes to zero or to a very low number, but then suddenly everybody wants to start using it again at the same time. What's your perspective?
Well, it's not going back to where we were. It's going forward to a new situation. What we found in our communities in Washington State is those of us who can successfully telecommute, can successfully telework, really, really enjoy doing it. So traffic is back up, transit use is back up, but the patterns are different. We used to see a morning spike in traffic and transit use and an afternoon spike in traffic and transit use as people were commuting to and from work. The morning commute is gone. What we see today is traffic starts off, around 5 in the morning, and it builds slowly over the day to the evening commute. And the evening commute's a lot like it used to be. So we're seeing a lot of people, and in my workforce, half of my team has been teleworking since March of 2020. And when I survey them, 75% of them want to telework at least 3 days a week forever going forward. And I thought they'd get tired of it, but the numbers are actually going up. They like the convenience, they like the flexibility, but people who telework are getting in their cars and going out at different times of the day. They used to drive early and then they'd be in one place all day. Now they're moving around and getting stuff done. They're also walking and biking more, just like in Sweden. We're seeing, our bicycle and pedestrian counters are up to 300%. And it's really putting a strain on our walking and biking infrastructure, because that system, unlike our highway system, is far from complete. So what we're doing as an agency is we're looking at that change in pattern and moving from a commute trip reduction strategy to a transportation demand management strategy that's 24/7, 365, and looks at things other than the commute. And we're working with transit agencies to how do we adjust schedules, adjust staffing, adjust the resources we apply to commute patterns that are fundamentally different. And our big businesses, Washington State is home to a couple of small mom and pop shops, Amazon and Microsoft. Amazon originally said everybody's coming back to work, and then about a week after that, they pulled back from that, and now everybody has the option. And the total traffic is not a lot different, but the patterns have changed. And for the highway user, they kind of self-select what time of day. But for transit service, intercity rail service, we have to think about what are the schedules and what are the volumes of service we provide at different times of day.
Mm-hmm. What's driving that effect of no morning rush hour, but still an afternoon rush hour? Is it that people are completing what they consider to be their workday and getting out and doing stuff? What's creating
I think
effect?
they're getting up and getting out. They're blending their work life with the rest of their life. When you have kids at home or you have multiple caregivers in the house, a lot of our families are multi-generational. They're taking care of children, they're taking care of parents, so they're able to more this in smaller bits mix that work life with the rest of life. We're not finding our people to be any less efficient. If anything, they're getting more done, but they're getting it done on their schedule as opposed to my schedule. And that's resulting in, maybe they want to have a meeting, they go out and meet with a colleague, or they go out and take care of grocery shopping. And they're, in the good old days, the only time they could grocery shop was before work or after work. Now they're doing it in the middle of the day and then doing work early or late to make up for it. So it's just it's giving people choices, which I think is a good thing.
Moving on to our topic of digital passports. A while back, 2 years ago, that might have meant an electronic passport of some kind on your mobile device, biometrics or something that would substitute for the old paper booklet that we've been using for the last 100 years. But now it sort of takes on a separate meaning because we're looking at potential vaccination requirements as we cross borders. Hamid, looking just at the sort of maybe next 6 to 12 months, not the far future yet, but for the near term, how do you see that evolving, or is it evolving, or is it just going to be a mess of confusion?
Well, first of all, I'm so sorry. I have to also add that we are experiencing the same thing, Mr. Millar, here in Sweden as well. The pattern is changing, absolutely, especially when it comes to delivery services. They are getting delivered to every person in our cities just because people stay at home working. Anyways, back to your question. I'm sorry, Roger. But the thing is that I believe that it's going to make a completely confusion in future when you have this passport and all the other people who don't want to get vaccinated, and various rules and regulations in each country in Europe. What's going to happen if for instance, in Sweden, we are very kind of liberal people, so we allow a lot of people going everywhere. But in other countries in Europe, where we actually move very smoothly between all countries here, they have their own regulations and how this will cope together. And we have, of course, a specific passport for a green card, kind of green card for every citizen in Europe. Still, there are different regulations being applied in different countries, and it makes kind of confusion, I believe. So we have to think about something else, I believe. We have to figure out what to do in a new normal. It should be new normal very soon. They say now it takes another year to see that this pandemic is ongoing, just because many of the people in this planet, they are not vaccinated, and only rich countries, they have been successful with vaccination. As long as we have those with us, so it's going to be, this pandemic, it's going to be prolonged in time. It takes time to get rid of it. So during that time, this confusion, I believe it's going to be normal. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know about the strategies in Europe. The only thing that I've seen is these digital passports giving to people who have got 2 vaccines. So I don't know really. It's very interesting to see what happens.
Well, Roger, here in the U.S., I think we probably got a little bit of confusion as well, because we have some states that are actually creating digital apps that are, in essence, vaccine passports, where other states, like my home state of Texas, has banned vaccine passports. So I think it's pretty unlikely that they're going to be launching an app for that very soon. And Then, of course, there's the crossing. It isn't a problem to cross borders in the U.S. by and large, although accessing venues, concerts, restaurants, and so on does take some proof of vaccination in some cases, in some places. How do you see this evolving from a digital standpoint? Is a third-party app the solution, like a Clear or something, both for domestic things and also international?
I'll be really interested to see how it all works out, because international travel is one thing, and we in Washington State, bordering British Columbia, we are concerned about that international space. But just locally, we at state government in Washington, Governor Inslee mandated that all of us will be vaccinated. Now, we don't have a little passport that we show, but we did use an app to verify and validate people's passports or their vaccination status. And the issue with that here in the US too is all of the privacy rules around health data. So, I can't tell you who on my team. It's complicated. So we used an app to verify that everyone is vaccinated, and currently all of our employees are vaccinated, or they have a medical or religious exemption to the vaccination, and they operate under some rules. But what I'm seeing is, going to a conference. I'm going to a conference next week. I had to download the Clear app and get my stuff on it because the conference venue is using an app to make that work. I have a couple of bands that I like to see, and Jason Isbell, a performer here in the United States, has said anyone who comes to one of my shows has to be vaccinated or tested, and you have to be able to prove it at the door. And I'm thinking that Clear app's going to be mighty handy for me in doing what I do. But it's not something government's doing. It's more something that the private sector is doing, and they're finding it protects them from a liability perspective. And nobody wants to be a super spreader. They want to maintain their business, and to maintain their business, they need a healthy clientele. They need a healthy workforce. And so I'm seeing that technology being applied more by the private sector than the public, at least here in Washington State. Now, where it goes as this becomes more and more universal, and we begin to think about how do we make this more efficient, I can't tell you. It really is early days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, the Clear app right now is used at airports for identity verification. And basically, you can skip the long line where people check your driver's license or passport, and they do a retina scan, and you pretty much go right to the head of the line. So there, it's not a requirement, but it's a convenience. And I guess that's one possible evolution that, you can go through the tortuous, slow process, or you can use an app, whether it's Clear or some other app, and skip the long wait. So that would be one way, perhaps, of promoting that sort of application. But Roger, what do you see overall as the time frame, if ever, for replacement, or at least very widespread acceptance of digital identification, for digital passports, digital vaccine proof, and so on, versus the wonderful old paper passport? There's still nice where you get all those colorful stamps from exotic places, but really it's technology from a century ago.
Well, yeah, and it is, but here in the United States, and I think in other parts of the world too, there are a lot of interests in that digital world, but there's a lot of pushback to it as well. I talk a lot. I'm very involved in the intelligent transportation world, ITS America. I'm vice chair of the board and was just at the World Congress. And I speak when I'm asked to speak on this subject that we need to harness technology to achieve our goals as society, rather than putting technology's harness on and working for the tech. So when I look at digital ID and stuff like that, the two, it's convenient, it's less expensive, but people have privacy concerns about it. And I think there are some legitimate privacy concerns. No one wants to be tracked. Now, we all have a cell phone in our pocket and we're being tracked, but nobody wants to be tracked by government. And so privacy is a huge issue. And another issue, everything we do in Washington State anyway is scanned. There are two lenses we look at it through. One is a climate change lens, and the other is an equity lens. And these digital technologies Are they for all of us, or are they just for rich white people? And so the equity issues around digitization and the privacy issues around digitization, the tech is the easy part. It's the policy calls, and they vary, as you pointed out. It's a little different in Texas than it is up here in Washington State, and we'll see how it goes.
Mm-hmm. Hamid, how about in Europe? You've got a different situation where you have a lot of international borders, but you also have a unifying body, at least for the EU countries. How do you see this digital passport evolving?
Well, digital passport, they are here already, and it is being used for all citizens in Europe. So that's not the problem. But the problem is that when, like Mr. Millar was pointing out, the different facilities they require or not require showing these passports. So there are a lot of, how can I say, people can choose. Suddenly people can choose who will be their client or not. In an open society like in Sweden, it is difficult to get this work. I mean, it's going to be very difficult. And another thing, like privacy issues, is one thing, very important issue to talk about. And another thing is actually security. A lot of problems coming in with the digitalization. Whatever it is digital, you can hack it. And if it happens, then there will be lots of problems. We have had several incidents in Sweden where people's information have been exposed to. I mean, they have been the other people have had access to it. So these are very serious problems. On the other hand, I say that what is the most important? I mean, a lot of financial information about us, we are dealing with it every single day. What are the issues that we wouldn't like to share with others? But still, privacy is very important to have. So I'm not sure if the way, like Mr. Millar was pointing out again, that the tech company, I mean, just because tech company drive this, it doesn't mean it is good for everybody, no matter what. The policy and regulations, how the tech companies can actually offer services that comply with our policies, regulations, very important, especially when it comes to privacy issues. So difficult issue, and it is not only like digital passport. This issue comes up. There are many other services, functions in our societies that are being digitalized, and we need to put in place a set of new regulations that really assure everybody's privacy. So these are things that we are working with very hard every day.
Yeah, Hamid, I think that all three of us probably attend normally, and at least in the past, multiple conferences every year. Some perhaps within our countries, others internationally. And of course, that ground to a halt. I've been to a few conferences lately, and they've been sort of weird because many people are still afraid to travel, but others showed up and they were so excited to be where they could be with other people and actually interact. So it was kind of a strange experience, but there is a hunger to connect in person again. But on the flip side, you've got Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook talking about rebuilding Facebook, not as a social media company, but as a metaverse company where presumably we are all in some sort of a virtual reality space. I don't know what we would look like floating in a tank at home or something, but I'm curious. I guess two questions. How do you see conferences coming back, particularly international conferences, but also as a transportation strategist, do you have some sort of big improvement in virtual reality on your radar that might actually affect local travel, international travel, and everything else?
Well, if let me put it this way, we need to interact, and we have to be together to feel each other and talk to each other. So a lot of things we cannot do it virtually, but these technical tools, they have shown that they have capacities, that they are very good for some kind of interaction. So why not the combination of both? I believe that the conferences will come back. Many people want to go there, and many people will also join it virtually. This is what I believe.
Mm-hmm. Roger, what do you think?
I think we're going to see, like a tool like the tool we're using right now, we're going to see this happening more and more. And, I'm looking at my team. We're making all of our conference rooms technically capable of having a hybrid experience where some people are there and some people are virtual. The tech is there. Figuring out how to use it and how to use it effectively is something we're working on. I've been to a couple of conferences since the pandemic, during the pandemic, as the pandemic matures, and it can be done successfully. And the human interactions that happen are vitally important to advancing our professions, advancing our society. So I think it'll be a hybrid. I am concerned that people like me in positions like mine will have lots of opportunities to go live. And younger people and people lower down in the hierarchy will be required to do the virtual experience. And I worry that that's going to affect them in terms of their professional development and relationship building. So I'm going to push really hard that mix of virtual and live experience. It's not for the well-to-do to be live and everybody else to be virtual. It's not a way to cut our training budget by watching. Send the young people to the live things, because that's how they learn and how they grow. So the tech is there. We could do all of this virtually, all we wanted. But what do we want as a society? What do we want as leaders in our profession? I think that's going to drive us back into that live space. But it has to be safe and it has to be effective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. The hybrid is here to stay, and you can't totally replace human interaction. For one thing, when you're in person, when you connect with somebody else, even perhaps give them a hug, you're releasing oxytocin. And as far as I know, there's no virtual reality yet that will allow that oxytocin boost when you connect with somebody else. So anyway, I think this is probably a pretty good place to wrap up. Roger and Hamid, I'd like to thank you for being part of this panel and for Webit for hosting this. And I hope we can connect in person soon. Thanks so much.
Great. Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Thank you.